Gabi Melamangil, and welcome to the Mirring Yalingwa podcast. Today I'm joined by Jenna Rain Warwick, who is a Luritja woman, a filmmaker, and a curator, and we are at Camp Sovereignty. And Camp Sovereignty is a protest occupation space that was established by Uncle Robbie Thorpe on January 26, 2024, first occurring in 2006. As a protest to the Commonwealth Games, or what was also referred to as the Stolen Wealth Games, the stolen wealth of the First Peoples. This is an occupation on the so-called King's Domain, which is a site where Uncle Jim Berg fought for the ancestors and the skeletal remains of the Aboriginal people in so-called Victoria to be returned to country and taken away from academic and government institutions. And that had occurred because in 1984, he fought with an injunction to stop the skeletal remains from, I believe, Cow Swamp and the Keilor archaeological site to be shown in New York. And so he fought against that and got the bodies of the ancestors returned, where they actually carried them through from Russell Street, from where, because the museum used to be at State Library, which is something that not everyone knows. But State Library or Melbourne Central used to be called Museum Station. So it used to have another name as well. But they carried the ancestors in a sort of cavalcade of Aboriginal people going down through the streets and brought them all here in ceremony. And so it's always something I like to remind myself that we're not just on a ceremonial ground, but on a burial ground as well when we're here, and that it's not just a sort of occupation protest space, but it's it's something totally different. Like it's so spiritual and beautiful here, and we need to re-indigenize this space, not just decolonize it. Yeah. So introducing Jenna.
Thank you, Jasper. That was a really good introduction of the space and the land that we're on right now. As Jasper said, I'm a Luritja woman. I grew up in Queensland, but my family live in Alice Springs. My grandmother was removed from Alice Springs out to Western Queensland when she was a little child. And my family's been in Queensland ever since. I do have strong connections still to family in Alice. It's the Pierce mob and the Thomas mob. My great-grandmother's name is Lily Tinjinjalpa. It's a one name and a little bit of language that I hold close to my heart without having connections and knowing my language. Yeah. But yeah, I work as a curator in the arts in Naarm, and I'm pretty interested in contextualizing so-called Australian film history through a lens of Indigenous kind of lens, and contextualizing things. So it's good to be on the podcast, and it's good to be here and be reminded about this sacredness of this place too. I just it's solemn, and we should always remember that there are old people beneath our feet. It's good to have a place in the city, especially. I come into the city for work 5 days a week, and it's nice just to have a space that is for us. And it's so good walking up the hill just now from the tram and seeing the Aboriginal flag. That is also, I'm very, very, very proud of the Aboriginal flag. That is my my grandmother's brother, Uncle Harold. That is his design. And I'm very.
That's an interesting fact.
Yeah. It's obviously with everything that's happened about the licensing, what your opinions on that? I think it's good for black fellas to have good conversations about who owns things, but it was a pretty hard time for my family to go through court cases and have that kind of pulled through the white media. It's all right for us as black fellas to talk about things, but I think it was when your family is kind of put on a bit of a under the microscope on the white media, I was like, oh, okay, this is a whole different thing. So I'm very, 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 very proud of it. and he, you know, he is an artist first and foremost. So that's where I kind of am coming from, and being young and seeing all his works in my parents' house. Yeah, it was really big inspiration for me. Yeah.
Wow. So how did you feel during the Free the Flag campaign?
I think it was funny being in Naarm. Like, I was here most of the time and just going up to Queensland, and kind of, I guess the connections that people mob down here have with it are really different to mob like in Alice Springs, because like his way is like, if you want to use the flag, just come and ask me, kind of thing, and it's like doesn't really translate into like, yeah, white fellas law. I guess it was funny. I just didn't, you know, it's just that thing of the like Australian media talking about your family kind of thing that made me feel a bit ill. Yeah, and just people having no idea and the history behind it, and like he's not, you know, he's not a politician. He's not he's an artist, so like he's not really someone to come out and do media statements and people wanting to like, yeah. It's hard, but it's a good thing. It brought up good conversations as well. Yeah. So it is what it is, you know. But I stick by my family, and they're my, yeah.
Yeah. So that must feel really personal for you when you see it hung up in spaces, like compared to anyone else.
Oh yeah, definitely. Right. Yeah. It just is reminding me of also like my kind of responsibility to the activist spaces, and to kind of yeah, I'm just like extremely proud of that, and then I love seeing it. I just remembered because, you know, I'm working the art space, I get to go international sometimes. I went to Germany a year ago and saw Richard Bell's Tent Embassy there, and I, you know, it was the first time being overseas for me, and I actually remember being like, this is the first time that anyone in my matrilineal lineage have left the Southern Hemisphere. And I remember like walking up to the hill and seeing the beautiful Tent Embassy in this like weird German kind of government space, and I was just like, oh wow, like it touched me how far, and yeah, it overseas, you know, seeing that flag and talking to Richard about it. But yeah, yeah.
Isn't Richard Bell so provocative, but in like a really special? The Andy Warhol of Australia, which is that's a take in itself.
I think it's all that's a take, however you want to take it. But, you know, always putting, you know, black artists in and trying to fit it into like what is this in comparison to what we have, and it's like,
that's true.
Yeah, I'm like, there's more to that. When he came to the First Nations Film Club that we Jasper's comes to sometimes, and talked, it was great to hear about his stories, and yeah, how he coming from Queensland, and you know, yeah. So he's a character for sure. I can see why he's had so much success internationally as well. I think visually, it's very, like, his work is easily recognizable. I think growing up also and going to like places like Goma in Queensland and seeing his work in there, it really made me feel like I could be in the arts too, and like have something to say too. Yeah, very inspiring.
Is there any works of his other than the Tent Embassy that you're inspired by, or something that sort of sent a message to you?
What's the famous one? Aboriginal art is white art.
Yeah.
That one. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. That kind of series.
Yeah.
I think the way it's something that we don't talk about enough, I think, is how comedy and kind of humor, you know, black humor is always, it comes from trauma, but it's like a very important way of resistance. And, you know, I think it's a way to keep ourselves like healthy and a distance from talking about re-traumatizing things, you know? Yeah. So, yeah, that, and seeing that huge in Goma, that was pretty, like, that big painting, that was pretty, like, well, it can be fucking cool and like yeah on our own terms kind of thing. Yeah, that was a long-winded intro, but yeah.
No, that's really good. And I guess, like, moving on from going on your own terms, you're currently working on a project, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I've I've been kind of working on this unknowingly. You know how things kind of not haunt you, but there's through lines through things that you don't even realize. Before I've started working as a curator, and I was just like, it's about Aboriginal roads, highways, and how they relate to our identity through cinema. Because when you think about Australian cinema, just in generally, it is the dusty red road. It's the road films. It's uh, back roads. It's all Mad Max. The big engines, and it just kind of there was like some kind of connection there that I wasn't sure what it was, and I wanted to investigate, why countries that colonial projects, maybe like Turtle Island and so-called Australia, what is that connection with the road film? Like, why is that so popular, just like the Western film? Obviously there's always going to be reasons behind why we affix that to our national identity. So that's a point. That's where the project has kind of landed. But I guess it was first of all interested in kind of Aboriginal motorcycle clubs. My dad is an avid motorcycle rider. I grew up riding motorbikes, and is kind of a space for me. There's outlaws and there's people who are, outside of society that usually end up taking up and being around those kind of circles. But I was interested in this, how, male masculinity kind of plays out in those spaces. So that kind of led me to talk to the Aboriginal motorcycle mob of Sydney. I did a little bit of interviews in them with the club members a couple years ago. There was big floods at the time, and I was trying to go to Sydney, but I couldn't because of the floods. But yeah, I've kind of so this project has led me to investigate this network of Aboriginal pathways that are all over this country, that highways are actually built on top of. When I was little, there's a road just near my house, the Cohen-Hunter road. My mum and I, when we would drive on it, she'd be like, this is like this is an old path, and we would stop and like look for middens and like artifacts and traces of the history there. Because often when you look at, most of the time when you look at the history behind these roads, they will call them cattle routes, and it's like, these are the earliest tracks made by cattle, and it's like, well, white people brought cattle here, like they did not make these tracks. But that is a misnomer for Indigenous walking ways, song lines, trading routes. Down here there's a lot of trading routes that link up to the snowy mountains with the moth trading.
I've heard about that, and I only heard about that the other day. Is that like around the bogong moth?
Yes.
People would come up big, and they would migrate up so that they could eat it, right?
Yeah. And trading on that, and migration going there when the season's good. And it reminds me of the. I'm gonna forget. There is a similar with the bunya pine trading route in Queensland. That's I'm like grew up on Gubbi Gubbi country, and that's a big trading route and a big almost as like you might think about how it's different, but the trading of cattle now and all of the the profit that kind of comes from that. But like originally they were blackfellow routes, and I think that it's not really a fact that people think about most when you're on the highway, just like remembering that this is not built by the Commonwealth. And in fact, most of the time when they were built, they were tied with things like the bicentennial walking tracks, the Jubilee. So the building of the roads and the renaming and the establishment is very much tied to the national identity and its connection to the Commonwealth. It's a long-winded kind of project, and there's lots of different through points, but it's about Aboriginal walking pathways, but more broadly about the road movie and kind of what that says about our national identity. I brought in the Southern Warriors to kind of help me with the project, and we got to the Southern Warriors are an Aboriginal motorcycle club in Victoria. They come from all around. They, you might have seen them at Uncle Archie's funeral, leading the procession. They very much, do good work with men's health, being a barricade between activist blackfellow movements and the police, and just in generally being a visual kind of presence in spaces that are hostile. But yeah, they're great. And so I got to go out with a film crew on January 26th, Invasion Day, to film their journey out to Cohen-Hunter. And that was really special for me, learning more about that history of that mission, and obviously talking with you, Jasper, about your family connections there. It was the 100-year anniversary of it being closed.
Yeah, I have heard about this.
And I didn't realize that, and that was kind of their marking, the remembering the path that William Barak took and went back there too. So that is a big part of so it's a video essay compiling that footage, films such as Ivan Sends Beneath a Cloud, Backlash, Back of Beyond, controversial film. I might get into a little bit later about who funded that, and Stone Bros. Have you seen Stone Bros?
No, I'm not familiar.
It didn't do too well. I think it came out in 2006, I want to say. It's like the first black stoner movie kind of thing. It's really great.
Cool. Okay.
I just kind of wanted to keep something a little bit humor too involved. But that's a project. If you want to come see it, it'll be opening at Acme on June 25th. It's called Beneath Roads. So,
So while Camp Sovereignty was being established, you were up in Cohen-Hunter filming. Isn't that funny?
It's funny. It's those things that kind of, those through lines and those connections that you're like, it's not on purpose. And the whole thing about it, the 100-year anniversary, I had no idea about that. That just so happened. And when I was talking to Jackie Wandon, one of the Wandons, the still the remaining family that's living there, she was really stoked about it, because she was like, this year is really about educating people about the significance and the timelines. It's like, I think sometimes live in a bubble where I think everybody knows about. Moving here, I knew that was a big mission. I knew that was important for like Aboriginal history here in Victoria, but I don't think I realised how ignorant that broader communities and broader populations are to it. Because when I was talking about it, I was like, yeah, of course, Cohen-Hunter, the big mission, or as you would know, and people were like, what are you talking about, kind of thing. Which is,
it's really bizarre when you're disconnected from it, because you just think, isn't that something that everybody knows?
I thought, and I think, I'm a guest on this country too. I don't have many connections to some, but I just, it's like that is quote unquote Victorian history.
Even at the time, the press was really interested in Cohen-Hunter, and they had these sort of daily updates, counts on the population, every wedding, every death, every birth. It was all written in there. Like when you go on Trove, so the people at the time were obsessed with it, and then suddenly it's just been forgotten about. It's not like it was something that was like drifted off into obscurity, like while people were living there. They were selling off hops to artisan breweries. They submitted their what's it called when you reap something from the farm? Their produce. Their produce.
The vineyards and the wines and all the produce.
The stuff that they were producing there, which was mostly hops, they were putting that into competitions and winning it. It's really bizarre, but there's some...
As in what they grow in Cohen-Hunter?
Yeah.
The blackfellows, they were doing that.
They were a self-sufficient farming community.
Yeah, true.
And it...
Actually, no, I did...
It sort of almost operated as a station. Like, it had its mission elements, but it was this very much like... It's almost autonomous, like black capitalism.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is maybe lost on some degree of like the pride that a lot of black communities have with the connections that they have to that mission or any missions. It's like a sense of home, and also when bringing mobs from all around, when you kind of have those connections have been severed. Like what is your sense of identity, but not the mission, and the people that live there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's been plenty of times I've had conversations with people, and I've said, "Who's your mob?" and they've just said, "Oh, I'm from Lake Tyers."
Yeah.
Like, there's some people, they say, "Oh, yeah, my family comes from Cumberland."
Or Cherbourg.
Yeah,
Many mob, but I know that's how you, if you're in Queensland, you say, "Oh, I'm from Cherbourg. That's my mob."
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So it is a sense of pride, of sadness, of good and bad.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I was doing on I was trying to wrangle some fellows to get filming, and it was good working with them. They were keen, but I was very much aware that they were there for business.
Mhm.
They were paying their respects to the people in the cemetery there,
Yeah.
and just being together and remembering the history, and also observing their responsibilities that they have.
Yeah, my third great grandmother's buried there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so she's got a gravestone there.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
I didn't go to the cemetery. Even though it's open and stuff, I was like, I just wasn't ready to go, and I don't know, had a feeling.
It's actually one
now.
that I've never known about permissions and stuff, if it's a place that's open to the public or not. And I've never actually had a proper understanding of that.
I talked to Jackie Wandon about that
Yeah.
because I was a bit unsure about filming there.
Mhm.
And I was like, if you want me to cut out anything, it's like, happy to do that. Just let me know.
Yeah.
And she was pretty much, there was a time when the permissions and who can go there was observed.
Mhm.
But I think now in this day and age, she's very much just wants everybody to know about the area with
Mhm.
respect, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's more about education, but that's where your great grandmother was, so you should have a say in that too.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
Would you want visit random people who don't know?
I wouldn't want people to stumble across it.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, the other thing as well is it's also so far removed from the town of Hurstville that you do kind of have to go there with intention.
You're not going to stumble up. And it's tucked away even, and you have to know that where that cemetery is and that road.
Yeah. Well, actually, I did do something about that. I took something into my own hands. Do you know what geocaching is by any chance? It's this sort of hobby where people with GPS or now their phone, they go and look for small containers in the bush and write their name on it to say that they've been there, right? And so I used to do that growing up when I was in Scouts. It's been around for a while. Well, actually, not too long, because the GPS only came about after the Clintons. So it used to be military only, and then suddenly they allowed the public to use it, and everyone was like, all right, let's go see if we can find a container in the middle of the woods. And that's how that hobby started. But I discovered that there was one in the cemetery, and I just went crazy, and I was like, we need to shut this down. We can't have people coming
name?
here.
Did you know the name? Did you recognize the name? Who put it there?
I had heard whispers about who the person was, and I just wasn't a fan. I wasn't a fan.
And there's a place, and maybe not in cemetery. That's not a right place to do that. And that's not a good way.
So I got it removed.
Good.
And everything like that. So I sort of came with a few ideas where I thought to myself, okay, people, it's public, people can come in. But if you're there sitting there with a phone and you're looking for something that's essentially a plastic box, so it's litter, and then you're trying to, write your name in there and then leave just to get, a new stat in this online game, like that's not the reason to go to the cemetery. So that's sort of that's where I'd led with that. It's all about intention. That's an example of, like, for me, inappropriate conduct.
Definitely, especially I would assume that there's unmarked graves in there too.
Oh yeah, there is. It's much bigger than that.
I just would assume. I didn't go in there, but if you want to put your name in there, but those people underneath the ground don't even have their name there, like that's a pretty fucked up thing.
Yeah.
Can I swear on this or not?
Yeah, of course you can swear.
Okay.
Yes. It's okay. It's marked as explicit. It's fine.
All right. Yeah.
But no, we had a lot of children graves that were there, and the thing that's really haunting is and it's in the backwards facing part of the cemetery, so you have to walk all the way through and then turn around. They've got a can there where they've got the list of all the people that are marked as being buried there, but it doesn't even fit within the constraints of where like the fencing could be. It just doesn't work like that. So it'd have to be larger than what's been there. And I'm so glad that the land is back now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was always kind of raised up with like not visiting people's graves unless you got, that they're your people or you've got permission and stuff. So I just kind
Yeah.
of always tread lightly when it comes to those kind of things.
There's
But
definitely a certain aspect and degree of respect that needs to be had. Because I feel like if I went to Faulkner Cemetery just to walk around, I'd feel that I was doing something inappropriate. But then there's something voyeuristic about Aboriginal graves that people suddenly kind of want to investigate,
true.
just purely based on the fact that it's an Aboriginal grave, which that kind of rubs me the wrong way. Like I feel like I wouldn't go to a white cemetery and do that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like you could get some things stuck on you that might stay with you for a long time visiting graves that are not welcome to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So filming on the day,
Mm-hmm.
how was that? Like technical aspects or time stuff? I don't know anything. How was it?
Yeah. So we started off actually filming at the rally in the Invasion Day rally at Parliament, and it was pretty. It was just me and one other person with a video camera on their shoulder. Um, Marlena, shout out to Marlena, she was great. And it was extremely hard to first off find those mob, even though they're loud and they got the big bikes. Those numbers were huge. It was so hard to get through that crowd.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It helped having a camera with us, and people kind of moved aside. But it wasn't until kind of towards the end of the speeches that we were actually able to get some footage. But we did early on. We did get them breaking the police line with their bikes to go park up. Yeah, it was, and then from then we raced to Cohen-Hunter to get them arriving. And then we had set up another camera, and there were two other cameras, and there were two drone operators. I'm not super technically minded, even though I did go to film school for like a couple months. It didn't really sink in. So I was with some real techie experts, which is great. It was also just, people, even the drone operators, they mostly do sports, kind of natural documentary. They had just come back from some snowfield, maybe in Japan, filming, and I was like, wow. So meeting them and like just even talking about what we were doing and just talking to somebody outside of the project was really cool, and they were really interested, and they like loved being a part of it. I think they were very felt very privileged to kind of be there and capture the fellas. It was just a really good atmosphere. Jackie Wandon did some good talk about her family connection and the history. There's the house there with the museum with all the pictures, which was good. I kind of I was very intentional being a witness there and with the film crew, and being like, where it's a privilege of us to capture this, but first and foremost, they're on their business. They're to just be together, and it's a solemn day too. So yeah, I tried. We were thinking about doing some interviews. I ran it by them, but at the time it was, it just didn't kind of work out. Yeah. It was, I think they just like loved being, they loved the drones, and yeah, it was good seeing all the kids there too. And I just love getting all the little details of the bikes. So they all got customizations and all the different badges and things. So yeah, I think what I see in the footage now, what comes across is, so much in this society and that we live in so-called Australia now, puts black men and black masculinity as a danger to society, and seeing kind of men being, not aggressive but loud and proud about um, loud and proud on the road, I think was visually just like so sick. Yeah, I'm very conscious of not kind of reinterpreting that with any kind of not criminal aspect, but kind of making it more seem that they're more dangerous as they are. I think that
Not to fall into like an outlaw stereotype.
yes, because that's not really what they're about.
Yeah.
Is like men's business, keeping people, mental health. They're really they're a support network that they do so much more than any kind of white or government kind of health program can because they really understand what it is like to be a black man in society, and also people that are overly criminalized. So I just wanted to kind of capture that. I think it's interesting. I was talking to Marlena, who was with me, who makes documentaries, and she was like, would you want to make a documentary? Like, would you be interested in this? And I had thought about it, but for me, I don't know if that's my place to, as a, I don't want to get too gendered here, but for me as a woman to kind of really contextualize and understand that and be in those spaces, I'm a bit unsure, and I don't know if it's my story to really tell. I think that, there's chapters in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, as far as I know. There might be others in other states. But yeah, it's a force for very much good. And I think if anybody does want to and is maybe somehow connected to any kind of Aboriginal motorcycle club and is black, let me know if you want to make a documentary and I can help you. But I'm not sure if that's for me just right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Also, just connecting to the fact that you've grown up around motorcycles and stuff as well. Like, you're not just like you are a fly on the wall in like the documentary sense, but you also are a part of it, and you're not sort of someone just capturing something that you're not embedded and aware of. Like, I think that actually is quite beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my mum is Aboriginal and my dad is white, but he, went to prison and was a criminalized man, and I've kind of seen, the people that he's around, and how wider society judges, not just like bike organizations, but men who've just been incarcerated, and it kind of hangs around them for the rest of their life. Yeah. So yeah, it's something that's like very much close to my heart, or close. I'm always kind of drawn to topics of masculinity. I don't know what it is. I'm trying to understand some things, but I think for me, especially as an Aboriginal woman, there's so much that is not necessarily seen as the stereotype is not feminized, like feminine, and often feeling that like being too masculine or being too loud and too aggressive is very much, not a good trait. So kind of grappling with those tensions of gender in this society, I'm like kind of interested in. Yeah.
Fascinating. I feel like I've almost lost for words just from hearing what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think maybe I'll continue with that project. I just got footage. We didn't really get any interviews because I realized that if I started delving into their stories, it would become like that's their story to tell, and it's not within the context of this video essay. Even though I'm taking their image, I'm not taking them. Obviously there's permission there, but I'm using their image to kind of understand the ideas that I'm talking about, and being black, proud on the road. There's no kind of information. There will be information about the club, but there's no interviews, so that's for another time. I'm very much in the mindset of like stories will reveal themselves and become something. They'll let you know when they need to be told, kind of. And I kind of doing that. I was like, I'm not sure if for me it's the right place for do at this point in time.
Yeah,
maybe it'll change down the line and something. Yeah.
Sometimes talking heads is too much.
Yes,
because it almost is like a trope of documentary in itself, where it's like, oh, here we go, another talking heads.
Yes.
And sometimes you don't actually need it at all to tell the story.
Yes, and also very much aware of like, yes, there is a president and there is a vice president, but they may not necessarily speak for all of those men, and they come to this place and this organization from different lenses and different ways. So I think the talking head things very much speaks to like explaining ideas and communicating it to a white audience, for me, it was very much just about having the visual presence on screen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Very interesting.
But yeah, they're staunch as.
Yeah. So how many people were there with motorbikes on the day that you were filming?
Like 40?
40.
Wow. But they kind of went and go. I'm very bad at numbers, but it was between 20 and 40. 20, maybe 20. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. Yeah. But, that's just the mob that turned up on the day.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably their biggest ride of the year.
Yeah.
But there is many, 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 many more members, across the state. Yeah.
So how do you think filming black men riding through to the mission subverts the regular sort of stereotypes around the road movie?
I wouldn't necessarily coming at a lens of trying to subvert anything, because that again is centering a white depiction.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was just about getting the idea about who owns the road.
Mm-hmm.
If we're thinking about these pathways and these highways that are originally made by First Nations mob all around this country, and the labor and the work that went into it,
Mm-hmm.
it was just really about situating that power and that strength and that knowledge back into it. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it's like a super conscious, like we're doing this to push against something else.
Mm-hmm.
It really, I just thought they just looked so beautiful, and I wanted to capture it. And I think I wasn't really planning to capture as much as I was, and again, the story was like, oh, that looks great, like we need to get this. So I think kind of having that juxtaposed against clips from films like Back of Beyond, which is actually, it won at Cannes. When did it come out? In the 60s?
Mm-hmm.
I'm really bad at, I should know this, my research. But, that was actually, so it talks about the Birdsville Track, which is, again, it's a trading route from South Australia up to Queensland, going across many different countries. There's many different stories and different connections to that route. But it's pretty much set use... It tells a story of a postman going to the outback to, do his rounds and making sure all the white people survive and they can get all their but all their little bits they need. And actually, on my further research, I realized it's a pretty, as you would see at the time, it's a racist film. That they have a black fella on there and they kind of dub him and kind of like make up some weird Aboriginal language that is not real. Yeah,
just made up out of thin air.
He's talking, but they just dub over him with like a white actor, like pretending to be black.
Wow.
So they're like, we've got old King Billy here, and then he goes on and he's like, da-da-ba-da-da-da-da, but it's like it's not his language.
Gibberish.
It's just gibberish. And there's a whole other kind of other arc of them being sad about the mission or the church not being there anymore, and that they missed the Dutch missionaries. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just of the time, that's like the understandings of as the dying race as they kind of portrayed it. But in my research, I realized that this was produced, made, distributed by the Shell Film Unit of Australia, which was active from the 1930s up until the 1980s, by Shell, the petroleum company. So much like early Hollywood, they were doing everything in-house, producing. They did ethnographic films, Back of Beyond, really like the adventurous kind of like, look at this white man going out in here. He's conquering all this kind of. And in this research, I realized they also produced one of the earliest animations in Australia, which is called King Billy. Have you ever seen it?
No.
I'll send it to you. It's like I forget the angle. It's an ad for petroleum, for petrol, but I forget the angle of how they're selling it. There's a koala, and then there's King Billy, which is a racist caricature of an Aboriginal man.
King Billy is always seems to be the nickname.
Old boy
the
King
go-to
Billy.
King Billy Coke bottle.
He doesn't know what he's talking about. King Billy is gonna die soon. Like it's fucked up.
Yeah.
And it's you watch it. It's in black and white, and you're like, this is horrific. Like, but now it's very hard to trace back to where that Shell being funding that.
Yeah.
And even in Back and Beyond, if you look at the released DVD, it has no mention of it being funded by a petroleum company. And
wow.
yeah, I've kind of been collecting all these different film programs from the Shell Film Unit. They would go to different communities all around and put on their films, but cut it for the community. So whoever, they would cut it for whatever they liked, kind of thing. So they would change the films. So they would set up the cinema, so you can go in wherever you're living, maybe in Birdsville, wherever, and go see a Shell-made film, probably of like, a racist depiction of Aboriginal people and a white man conquering some things.
Where do these sit now? Like
the films?
Yeah.
They're very hard to find.
Yeah.
I've in my research, they're kind of like, they don't want people to know that. They don't want people to know that the petroleum company, just like Kodak, were the early days of Australian media, film, and TV. They had their hands in it. Like the earliest film, is the Kodak ethnographic up in the Torres Strait of Saibai Island. And it's just like, it's just strange and peculiar to think about that the beginnings of cinema comes from like big companies like Paramount. Paramount have produced some really early road films in Victoria, actually. They're like kind of educational ones. And that it makes sense though, because they like the idea of Shell. They wanted to explore more of Australia so they could tap more resources. If you make a film that is about, a white adventurous going and conquering this land and feeling, oh, we need to have petrol to go out to go see these things and go do the road trip. It's also interesting that film, as the material itself, is a petroleum byproduct. So it really was in-house.
As in the chemical to produce film. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So that's where I've been kind of researching and getting a little bit locked into at the moment. I might do another kind of exhibition about the film unit. There's a great thesis written about it, actually, and the construction of the colonial identity through the film unit.
Yeah, Shell backed militias to displace people in Africa.
When was that? What?
All over the place. Like, and I know that we've got like the lithium going on at the moment and cobalt mining in the Congo, but Shell has been, and British Petroleum were really the OGs of sort of displacing people and backing militias. To move them out. I wonder what the sort of greater purpose and intention of going out to remote communities was from these petroleum companies with a camera. Did they have execs going with them, sussing out the land?
Oh, yes, definitely. There's I'm still kind of early in the research, but there's like this story of like them making a film in like the 60s and using the like aerial camera with some kind of plane, but at the same time they were mapping places of where they might think resources were. So it was like a hand in hand. We're making a film, but we're also like looking for places to mine.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, and I've kind of, it's been hard to kind of uncover these connections because it's obvious to me that they've kind of been since probably the 80s distancing themselves from this film unit. It's like very hard to. Sorry to waffle on. Do we have more time to talk about?
We can talk about this. Absolutely.
There's this. They actually, going back to the Shell Film Unit, they paid this guy, I forget his name. I should know his name. He was pretty much like a con man in like the 40s. He was a magician. He was just a weird dude. They paid him to drive the all around Australia. Paid for his petrol. He ended up collecting Aboriginal artifacts. By the end of it, he comes into Sydney and he's got boomers, he's got spears, he's got lots of all these, he would like to say gathered, stolen artifacts. And his collection is in one of the museums in Sydney. And I was reading some of the curator notes and they're like, we don't know why he went around Australia. Why he collected all these artifacts is because Shell paid him to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, those kind of informations of like, why did they get this con man to go around Australia and document and pay for his fuel? Like, it's just the early days of so-called Australian film and TV is really bizarre.
Well, we were talking about this earlier. Bushranger films. Are you aware of the history of that?
No, tell me
that's
more.
another
Tell
thing
me.
that's bizarre.
I
I'm
might.
happy to talk on that if
Please.
we talk about the early days. So it's around the 1920s, and one of the things that people don't know when they look at Hollywood, right, as the birth of sort of Western cinema, but it was actually so-called Australia that was the site for like the beginning of Hollywood and all that kind of stuff. Like not Hollywood as in like the town of Hollywood, but the creation of cinema, Western cinema, the industry.
Yeah.
And the most popular thing at the time was bushranger films, right? So most of them are seen as lost now, except for a few. The first film, the first feature film created was about the Kelly Gang. And that was, it's hard to say how long it was because certain pieces have been lost and replaced together. But the government saw them as so negative and highly influential that they put a crackdown and banned the screenings and production of all bushranger films because they found that the screenings of
portraying white people in not the best way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like they found that portraying criminals would make people criminals in the same sort of way, you know. That's how it's always been since the dawn of time, right? With music and
also the thing that it was, they're not, they might have been inducted into the, those different police forces and bush, but originally they're con artists. They're like, they got no, training or anything. They're not government people. Not that that legitimizes anything, but the government doesn't have control over these people. They're just like paid and like yeah.
So there, thousands and thousands of lost cinema, and it was all because the government banned it. And
do you know where where any of it is?
Sometimes lost media can just be found in the back of a pub in a tin. That's the thing, like because it was physical tape, there wasn't much. There was no such thing as film preservation at the time. So they were, going over all sorts of stuff, getting rid of it if they didn't like it, cutting it up, chucking it in the bin, or it would just expire and all sorts of stuff like that. So a lot of that original tape is just gone.
And how does that relate to America, like that tie back to Hollywood?
Well, because that was sort of the birthplace of feature-length cinema.
Yeah.
But the crackdowns on the screenings of the film had a dramatic impact not only on the local economy here, but also the employment of women in cinema. Like one thing is that like so many women were employed prior to these crackdowns and censorship. And the industry completely shifted over after the government stepped in to what private institutions were doing to create film. And we still remain as one of the most censored film countries ever. Like the laws and the history of the Bushrangers films bled so far into pretty much the Abbott government, where there was these fights to try and get certain video games in because of censorship and everything like that. And I was actually documenting for some time on what the Australian government considered like couldn't be shown in the country and all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of a fine line now, but even something like Pink Flamingo was like really banned for a long time to get into the country. There was the protest where there was, I think, any films depicting homosexuality was banned in Tassie, like up until very recent time. And it all kind of affects then, like if we've had this long time of not being able to screen certain forms of media that might make white people look bad, how does that then affect filmic history from these private institutions of Aboriginal people? What are they getting away with when the white people can't?
And also erasing, black people's history in the film industry and a sense of pride and being like, because I often think about working the arts and think of it working the film as it's a European kind of thing, and it's just I always have to remind myself that that we've been kind of involved since day dot in Australia with the film and with media production.
Yeah, there's lost media of my mob that was commissioned by the government.
Talked about this at one stage. Wow.
Yeah. Like I can't remember exactly what the year was, but there was this film that was commissioned by whatever I sort of guess the Department of War would have been at the time, war and propaganda and all that in Australia, because it was never the Department of Defence, it was the Department of War. You know, they had all that kind of stuff.
And they had a rebranding.
They had a rebranding. And so with the propaganda, they had this thing that I think now falls under like the Australian Film Commission and everything like that. But they had a department of sort of cinema and film called like the Commonwealth Cinema Branch. That's what it was called. And they created, during the time that there was that referendum or I guess ballot about the national anthem, they had this short, I guess, newsreel done that was composed by Dudley Glass, who did the Song of Australia or something, which was one of the votes. And they went around and filmed all of the nativities and, you know, the birds. They went all around and filmed like Australian life. But they went down to Corandurk and they filmed some Wurundjeri mob with like doing songs. So this was a talkie as well. Like it wasn't just no audio. So it was a talkie. They had songs. They had demonstrations of tools, like paint ups, dance. Where is it? So I got in contact with whoever. It could even be Screen Australia's now, because it all just absorbs down into another government entity.
Yes, it's so, yeah.
So it was the Commonwealth Cinema Branch, and then it was something like the Australian Film Commission, and then it suddenly went down into Screen Australia, and then now it's in the National Film and Sound Archive. So I found the film, got it digitised, and that cut's not in there. So I'm still looking. But it's meant to be in there because I found some local Healesville papers that were talking about it. And this was filmed on Corandurk. They were like,
we got filmed, or so we were waiting for this film. Or
that's the thing. You went and did some filming on Corandurk.
Yeah.
But then, like, you know, almost like longer than 100 years ago, they did a film in Corandurk where they had mob painted up and everything like that. And it's bloody lost.
Lost.
It's gone.
Intentionally lost.
I reckon intentionally.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you know, that's always... a thing for our mob is like access to archives. There's images and information of my family actually in the, you know, with most blackfellas can say, held in the National Museum, the one in Canberra. And there was a big because Nanny, my grandmother's from born in Alice Springs in NT. There was a big court case with the Stolen Generation to kind of get reparations for that, which it was going on for over like 15 years, but finalized last year. We did get some money, which is good, but it never makes up for that. But in kind of putting her story together and getting, you know, materials, not just her own interviews, we were like, oh, we can get these documents. It's from the archives, but you know, we had to prove that was my nanny. And we have to prove
prove that relation,
and we couldn't even access them. So there are still things of my old people that I would love to look at, but because they changed her name so many times, it's like, oh, she's Janet Smith. That could be anyone, you know. Yeah. So it's and it reopens so many wounds again. So trying to do these things on behalf of my mum and for my nanny, it's like something that I do want to investigate, just like you're trying to find those tapes of your people.
There's so much, and they keep it there, but they don't even want to access the funding want to look at it to even like write on the back like who's in this picture. And
and I've actually been thinking about this, about how so much of, you know, even when talking about the remains being buried here, like how they are archived and not even there's no information on where they're from, who it is. It's you know,
everyone's unknown
black
there.
Man, or like, you know, black child or Aboriginal woman. There's no identifying because they just didn't care. It's just
they didn't even know where they came from.
There's exactly. So I've been thinking about how, you know, when we're talking about this is a little bit off topic, but there's a big push for AI technologies to have access to archives. In America and in Australia, and a lot of museums and archives, they said pretty much no, we don't want to. And I was like, oh yeah, I wouldn't want people, you know, my images of or any materials of my old people being used as a data point. But then I was like, you know, it would be interesting to use that technology to sift through materials if you fed it an image and like, can you find this image?
Or AI facial recognition is a thing.
Yeah. So I was like, maybe, you know, in the right hands, and not being like, oh, it's an evil kind of technology, but how can we kind of use it to know what's in there? And even if sometimes opening up those wounds, especially if it's your old people, that is too much for them. They don't want to like go back into that. How can we use this technology so they can access it when they want to, but it's not a re-traumatizing thing. Just thoughts.
Blackfellas need to tap into AI. I think we've got the right. I know that they're all. Did you see the recent stuff with like, I think it's Sora AI? There's like videos. I don't know why my Instagram's recommending to me. There is this lifelike AI that it scares me too much.
What is it? Of
it's
Aboriginal
like
person?
No, like it's this new company that basically is like causing executives to stop productions of their new studios because they're so freaked out.
To make films. Yeah.
So Sora AI. I can't exactly remember who the filmmaker it is, but it's a black filmmaker in America. And I reckon his name's Tyler Perry. But I reckon his name's Tyler Perry. I reckon that's it.
That the guy who does the comedies and stuff.
Yeah. So he invested in this $1 million film company, and he has now cancelled it indefinitely because of this new AI product that's come out onto the market that looks human-like. It looks film-like. They're producing these insane transitions. I saw this video of this what they call like a sky rail, and it's filming the sky rail, and then suddenly the sky rail just like merges into a tram and you're in the city within seconds. These things that like I don't even think that people could come up. It was the way that like two interesting shots already interact with one another was created by why can't I say AI? Artificial intelligence. AI. There we are. Freaked me out.
Yeah.
Like, and they're actually cancelling massive companies that are and studios because they're freaked out by this technology.
Yeah, it's whilst it's scary, it is also like something that we need to kind of be thinking about, and how images and stories of our own people are made in Australia, I guess. I think about when this kind of comes to public kind of conversation about the ethics behind AI technology, and it obviously very obvious it became that it was just replicating the biases of different societies. If you're using datas that originally coming from like an extremely racist lens, they're only just going to re-show those things. I was at this talk and I was talking about how a generative AI technology, like if you typed in a white man, like it would show you like just white men not doing fully clothed, and then if you type in black woman, it's heavily pornographic, like over 8, and they kind of had to, and they censor those pornographic images. But in that term, it is kind of changing that narrative, and like I think there needs to be more than just like feeding information. I'm interested in not just replicating kind of already our society on online platforms, I guess. I don't know. I'm not the most technical savvy person. Like, I am an analog person at heart.
Yeah.
So I know I'm even using the word AI is like that's a science and a technology in itself, and you don't say like AI, but we just use it kind of interchangeable when we know what we're in generally. But yeah, it's something that we need to be thinking about for sure, especially with images of our people, and who has control of that, and like what data is being fed into these machines.
Not just even images, but like if you had a GPT based software with a language that like is readily available with a dictionary, someone could translate English to an Aboriginal language with a GPT based AI.
Yeah.
And they've got paragraphs and paragraphs of an Aboriginal language.
Yeah.
Without the consent or knowledge of the people.
Yeah. I mean, there is already technology being used in. I know a friend of mine who has an app based in the Mirring language, which is up in Naarm, and and it kind of, I was like, oh wow, this is great for community use, and then it, outside of that, it becomes like pretty.
It's no longer close practice.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, coming from like, I don't speak my language, and the Luritja dictionary, there is one that exists, and it's written by the Dutch missionaries, and I was like kind of talking it to Mum. I was like, we'd love to like learn a bit of language, and she's like, you don't learn it through that, because that'll make you like sick and like not good. Like, it's not, even though it's there, it's not the right way to go about. And I think there's the conversations about teaching language in school. It's interesting. I think a lot of people, blackfellas, have different varying opinions on it. Yeah.
Well, apparently Woiwurrung's being taught in Victorian schools. First I heard of it. Like
Somebody
last
told
week.
me that, I think. Yeah.
Last week someone told me that a school that they work at, or maybe their kid is at, that they're all getting taught language. And obviously it's not.
How do you feel about that?
Well,
it's like good and bad. It's mixed feelings, hey.
I feel like I don't even know the names of every animal.
No.
But the thing is that the way that they teach it is like head, shoulders, knees, and
Yeah.
toes. The animals maybe are the classroom names.
Yeah.
It's cool, I guess, but
Yeah.
I also
But it
think like I don't think
from
our
culture.
well, I don't even think our people know our language well enough for it to be taught. Like, yes, it's great, but then like who's facilitating the class? They're not going to be a Wurundjeri person.
Definitely.
So, is it being pronounced correctly?
Yeah.
Is it culturally correct?
Yeah,
we have such intricate like pronoun systems and
Yes.
suffixes, and the way that we do language and sentence structure. Obviously, that's not going to get taught to preps.
No.
But our people don't even know that.
No.
And like
the complexity is lost.
Yeah.
And you're not, and if you're not, in the context of on your country and like learning and being like, this is, physically, this is what this is kind of thing. It is. Yeah, I feel
it's quite freaky.
It is freaky. A couple of years ago, again, I was visiting my friend who is a linguist, white fellow linguist in up in Mirring country, and there were so many American white academics who had made their career on their theses on these Aboriginal languages, and it was honestly like, it made me feel really like sick hearing these people, these pretty anthropologists, just talk about and have these languages, and it made me feel sad again that I don't know my language, but angry again. I don't know. It's just, I think about time and time again, even with art, white art critics making their career, making their money off of our culture and our cultural knowledge, and they have the privilege of they go to a community, be there for a year and leave, go back and push this thesis for the continuation of their career, and it's like, okay, you get to leave and take that into your white privilege world, like, and I think about who is reading them, and like who is really benefiting from that. I think what it comes down to. And I think I've had this conversation about language being taught with different people. Obviously, there's, we are vast people with different understanding and different opinions. And I think it's one of those things where it's a conversation we should be having broadly within our community, but it not necessarily should be for the wider Australia to have an opinion on.
It's none of their business.
Yes, because you have well-intentioned people thinking that it's how can there be any negative thing? I want to learn, and again, it kind of comes of like, what gives you the why should you know that? Like, what gives you the right, to have
considering
something?
There's like only ever few speakers, fluent and stuff as well.
Exactly. What gives you the right to because it's not just language, it's knowledge. It's not knowledge about the country, and there are secrets in those language that should not be shared. I think it's one of those things that a lot of well-intentioned allies and white Australians kind of, I guess it's maybe because of the relationship to English and other like big languages, is that it's kind of lost its cultural context, and that I worry that it will be the same thing if kind of Aboriginal languages are put into the Australian education system, in that, there's secrets, there's messages, there's song lines, there's so much information in our languages that I, just like as we were talking about data sovereignty, that I am not willing, and I don't want to kind of give over to a colonial project that has killed and continues to displace and kill so many of our people. So that for me, and I guess it's kind of like funny, I don't speak my Luritja language. It's a couple words that I'm always picking up here and there, but there is a dictionary, and it was written by I forget his name, good riddance, but the Dutch missionary who came, I think Lutheran missionary, he was Dutch, to Hermansburg and on Luritja country, and that is all kind of his writings, and he's translated that into English for the infiltration of Aboriginal communities, and also for the benefit of taking away children. So that's what it was used for.
Yeah.
Understanding of, whose kids are there, where, understanding language. And I kind of brought that up to my mum a couple of years ago and been like, I want to learn language. Like, did you know that this dictionary exists? And she was like, yes, I know. Like, that's a very sore point for us. And that she was like, you don't learn it from there, because that, she pretty much said in simple terms that it was going to make me sick. If I learned it from there, that I would not have a good relationship with my culture, and that it would kind of tinge it a little bit, because it's through the lens of an evil colonizer that did so much harm to my family, so I've always been told, even though there's a lot of distance and strain into Luritja culture because of being my nanny being taken away, there was one thing that always remains, and that language is so powerful that it needs to be given to you in the right way, and by old people or on country. It needs to always be centered on the country, the art, and the place, and those kind of histories, and that kind of repurposing it for a classroom context is, a colonizing form.
It depoliticizes our right to use our language.
Yeah. Yes.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, because we were banned from speaking it, and now suddenly the colonial education system has a right to something that was banned.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
And in another point too, it strategizes and tries to uniform our language, because, and I know in my language that there's like 3 to 4 different ways to speak it, depending on who you are.
Same.
Depending on your gender, depending on your relationship to that person. So yeah, by kind of making it as a one kind of language, just like how English or French is, again, glosses over the complexities of it.
I agree. I completely agree. Because we've got those systems that are so embedded, like, because community and family is so strong and still is in our culture. One of the things is that was reflected in the language. So the complexities of the ways that you would speak about certain people that I suppose white people wouldn't even consider their own blood relations, even if they're like third cousins. There were words that we had for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, to show respect, to show your relationship to the person that you're speaking to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So steering to some road movies, in particular, I watched The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith yesterday, and it's actually, I reckon I've watched it twice within the past 2 months. So it's always a film that I'm very fascinated by. One reason, which is an odd reason because I'm not too much of a fan of him, but Quentin Tarantino actually says that it's one of his favorites, which is a bizarre thing though, right?
I can see that.
So he did a tour down here where he was talking to the press and staff and audiences, and he did a double screening of his new film. It might have been Django Unchained or The Hateful Eight. I can't remember which one. And he screened it here locally alongside The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith.
It's also such a shame, to be honest, that it takes somebody, from overseas to kind of celebrate and to be like, this is an important film. To just, obviously, like,
for First Nations people, that's always in our TV. People know that's a film. That's something in our history and our catalogue. But I don't think it might have been widely accepted or celebrated to the wider quote unquote Australian
I think Backroads
community.
is almost considered a B movie.
Yeah.
But they're like both of those films together are both done by white directors,
Yeah.
being Fred Skepsky and
Philip
Noyce.
Yeah.
Like they're both white men that have gone and created these films, and also like going through Backroads does have that community infiltration and stuff like that because Auntie Essie Coffey's in that movie.
That's
And
right.
stuff. So there's some interesting. That part of the film sort of almost plays out like documentary. It doesn't feel like there's any script to it.
Yeah. And I guess that is like probably wasn't scripted that much. And didn't Uncle Gary have a lot to do with the kind of making of it and have the veto power as well?
I think he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is that's a whole nother podcast, but to talk about Essie Coffey's legacy is that when her film My Survival as an Aboriginal, that she went over to Berlin and that I always think about how so many of the quote unquote Aboriginal films are celebrated more so overseas than they ever are here. Yeah, it always comes back to, especially there's some kind of weird relationship that German people have and Dutch people in Aboriginal histories and culture. I don't know what it's interesting. I remember being on the plane.
You're right though.
From Berlin, and I saw this guy. He was a fool. Like he's speaking German, and he was reading a book about rabbit-proof fence, and I was just like, "What is this?" And there was another guy.
That's bizarre.
It's bizarre, and they were like, and I, it just kind of pops up more so than any other kind of European country. There's like, I don't know if it's romanticization, just there's an interest there that I'm yet to kind of fully flesh out of like what is kind of behind that. I don't know.
Maybe they're getting more information than people down here do.
Well, and as we talked about Richard Bell before, he kind of talks about that a lot, and because he's over in Europe and he's like traveled extensively, there is a willingness from international audiences to engage with our histories that audiences here just do not want to. Yeah. Too close to home, too unsettling. I think it's a mix of everything. And it's also, I think it comes back to like Australian audiences often don't want to hear Australian accents on screen. There's a lot of research and theory behind that of like why it is so jarring to us. Especially the real Okinawa languages. It's just like hard to kind of take that out of the character that we might think that would be speaking from that. Yeah.
I had this really weird interaction. I think it was someone from America, and they were trying to figure out. They were trying to get some quotes from Backroads when Uncle Gary Foley was talking, and they were saying something. They're like, "What is he calling the white people? Is he calling them gabbos?"
Gubbers.
And I'm like, "This is gubbers. He's saying gubbers."
Yeah.
But there was this person from America that was trying. They was on Letterboxd and they were writing all these things, going, "And what was it that Gary Foley was saying? Was he saying gabbos?" They didn't know. They don't know.
Yeah.
I think maybe the reason that it appeals to people overseas is that it a lot of those films like Backroads, they don't actually appeal to white sensibilities. So there's no sense of personal attack. People will be like, "Oh, wait a minute, this is attacking me. I'm the audience member and I'm being attacked right now." I think that like a lot of the unapologetic films of the National Black Theatre, and that also including Backroads, is that they actually didn't care what the white audiences wanted to see, and so that's probably why it does better overseas.
That's true, yeah. And it just, as you said, just goes to show that I'm not censoring or not changing the kind of language that they're using,
Yeah, I had to explain to this person like where Gubba came from, what government was, why do we hate the government here? Like they didn't care. And I just found it was such an odd interaction because I was like, I haven't even probably explained what Gubbers means to a white Australian because they don't care. They don't want to know. And here I am talking to a white American. Explaining lingo.
I've only recently been privileged enough to be able to travel overseas, and it's interesting kind of when people ask you, obviously, like, I am a white passing woman. You might not know that I get mistaken for ethnically ambiguous, but, I kind of am not really, unless somebody asks overseas, I'm not kind of going to be like talking about it because it's just a lot to unpack, and there's a lot of history that you might have to know about. But I was in the Philippines recently, and they were asking, this uncle there, Tito Robin, was asking me about my religion. And it's very much you're either Muslim or you're Catholic there, and that's like a lot of places. It's like there's not kind of what's the word when you're not religious?
Atheist.
Like that just doesn't exist, and I'm not an atheist either. But I kind of explained to him. He was like, "So you're Christian?" I was like, "No, I'm not Christian, and here's why: because Christianity was used to colonize my people. Like, I'm an Indigenous woman." And he was like, "No, I understand it because we have had waves of colonialism." And then he took it upon
the colonialism in the Philippines is disgusting.
The Spanish rule to Japan, and then to they're called the American War. It was like, it was just a genocide. It was horrific. Anyway, because he understood in some ways, and he got where I was coming from. He kind of took it upon him. Anybody would ask me like where I'm from or anything, and they use the word native over there. That's if you're native, and I was like, that's your word. Like, I don't feel offended by that at all. And he would be like, don't ask her. She's native. Don't talk to her about. She's not Christian. And I just loved it. Like, once he understood, he was like, nah, I'm with you. I'm fighting. You're not. Yeah. And it's like, but obviously that kind of comes from his understanding of Christianity and colonialism. I think it's in. I think you have to be in the right headspace to talk to when you're overseas, to talk and unpack the levels of history here. I'm like, I'm not a history book. Go look it up.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's some people overseas that would just have no idea at all.
Yeah.
At least here, like, some people might have some idea. I had someone come to Camp Sovereignty that they said to me, "Oh, is King Benelong buried here?" I was like, no.
I think they just know one Aboriginal word or name. And just
like, that's a kind of ignorance that you get here on this continent. But then there's people that are like blank slates overseas, and you're like, all right, I'm going to teach you a little bit.
Yes. I guess it depends on where you are and their own experience of colonialism.
Yeah.
I love being here and kind of seeing the look on a lot of people's faces, trying to work out what the fuck this is. Yeah, it's kind of interest, a bit of trepidation. It's cool. I don't know. I love it. I think it's a great starting point for. There's so many international visitors here too. I think it's a great starting point to a point of investigation, in that it doesn't rely on you trying to have to educate someone. It's like, what is that? Maybe I'll look at what that is online, or I'll read up about it. So I think it's a really great message for that.
Yeah, well, there's so many big plans that are currently being had. Cultural Interpretation Centre that doesn't impact the soil, like it's going to sort of hover over the ground.
Interesting.
Pretty much in the back here.
Yeah, wow.
There's been some architectural designs and stuff drawn that I've had a look at. It's pretty interesting what's being proposed.
Yeah.
Like here, it's not just sort of a regular sort of occupation or even like Occupy Melbourne style protests. Like, there's some big plans here to take the land back for the benefit of everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Much. I think it's a great space for education, and a meeting point for all kind of cultures and people to understand the struggle of Aboriginal people on this land. I'm sorry we derailed from talking about the road film, but yeah, I also I think I took that from Essie Coffey's filmography, and I just wanted to spoke her name. And if you don't know her, please look up her films. It's
absolutely. But that's how these conversations go. They are organic, and things find themselves. Like, I feel like I'm going to go home tonight and just Google and search up about the Shell Film Company.
I'll send you some. I'll send you the video, the animation crazy. Of King Billy.
Yeah.
There's some. I bought some eBay some film programs from the 60s that they were like pushing it. So obviously it's super racist, but interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And something that's kind of like, and you're talking about, archives and your family's connections to early cinema, something that's intentionally buried. These histories.
Absolutely, yeah, because they don't want to touch them.
No. Yeah.
They just leave them there. Like, there's things that are in these archives that we just can't even tell. And then it's also so traumatizing as well for any Aboriginal person that wants to go in there and actually do it. Like, what happens If you've got like an Aboriginal woman that's working and you're opening up men's
I
business,
know, yeah. Yeah.
like videos,
Mm-mm.
like there's things like that the white fellas, they won't even understand.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah.
Like they won't even get that that's even culturally sensitive,
Yes.
let alone like should be locked down and sent to the people that
Yeah.
to the men of that community.
I often kind of come up with this when talking about men and women's business, especially when the art spaces of like, and talking about like, get that reaction of it being heavily gendered and things like that. It's like you just don't understand. There's some things that it's not necessarily about a sex, or like it's just like it's men's business, women's business. I don't know.
Yeah, it's separated equally. That's the thing. Like
Yeah.
I think that
Hard to put it in the context of what like a white feminist view, I guess.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Because if you're looking at from like the perspective of like a patriarchal society, and then you're looking at something that's almost like proto-communist, and you've got like equal responsibilities of both genders that's separated respectfully. Like, you go left, we go right, and like it's just not something that I think it's hard to explain within like a colonial structure to people that are deeply embedded in that. They're not going to understand.
Yeah.
Like I can't even conceptualize certain things to people in words.
I often have that of like struggling to not comprehend it, but just to explain it on a way that would be understandable if we've not kind of grown up around these concepts and understand them like in a lived kind of experience, I guess. And not that I've gone through any kind of women's ceremony, but there is, even within, because my culture comes down from a matrilineal, it's always been women. It's a direct woman descendant. So there's stuff that I have that I know it's women's stories, and then I wouldn't really share.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's just something that like I hope through dialogue with settlers that there is a potential way to make them understand, but I almost feel like it can be a lost cause unless they come on the journey. And sometimes we don't want them to come on a sensitive journey, so it just like goes in cycles where it's like, how do you communicate to these people effectively?
And I love the term business because it's very much like you don't get to know what it is. It could be anything. It could be strategizing, it could be language, just like black business. Like it's on a need to know basis.
Oh, we had some people come down to Camp Sovereignty the other day, and it was this. It was a facilitated session for Crime Scene Australia, just about like the legal implications of an upcoming genocide bill. Mark Dreyfus, as the Attorney General, can veto any like cases of genocide in this country, stuff like
Veto
that.
power.
Veto power, yeah. So that like the Genocide Convention can't be brought in legally via any court because it can be vetoed by the Attorney General. So it's something like that. And these two white fellas came walking up and they asked one of the uncles, "Oh, what's going on here?" And he just goes, "Business."
I love that. None of your business. It's just business. Yeah.
And he just turned away and he just walked off.
Yeah. That is one word that kind of I love that we've kind of like taken.
It locks it down.
It's black business, not for you to know. And I guess I think that is maybe a differencing point between settler, European culture is the ownership of wanting to know everything. And it's very much not in Aboriginal, and I'm talking about even when stories just before, they will let you know when they need to be told. And I've had experiences of coming across information that I know that I would not have been able to understand or understand the importance until I was at that point to really understand it,
Yep.
There's a right time and a right place and a right setting, and that things will come to you when they will reveal the power of some stories, and some business will reveal it when it needs you to.
Absolutely. I reckon we wrap up today's session.
Sure.
Because we're closing off.
That sounds great.
Yeah. So it was really great having you on today. We're just getting surrounded by corellas right now.
Beautiful. I love hearing
beautiful. That's the sign. That's the sign of nature.
Sign.
Yeah. Wow.
We've got to read some signs around and be listening always and being
absolutely. Yeah. So, is there any place that maybe listeners of the podcast can be directed to your work or anything that you'd like? Call to action for the people listening.
You can look me up just on Google, Jenna Rain Warwick, and find some of the writings I've written about cinema. Or you can come on my Instagram, Rain Damages. I also talk about. I'm a big music fan. I'm like everybody in Naarm, also a DJ sometimes. But
My brother's a DJ, so
but yeah, go on just message me, or I do work at the Australian Centre of the Moving Image. Can you come to the show or look me up on Instagram? Always down for yarns and interesting through points of, if you've heard something I've talked about and you know something about it, please let me know. I am in deep research mode. Before we kind of end this, I do just want to also shout out my beautiful mother Karen and my nanny Janet, and all my family in Alice Springs, my auntie Mel, Uncle Philly, and shout out Luritja Mob, love you guys. And if we're related, connect.
Well, Nungoljian means thank you in the Woiwurrung, so Nungoljian. So I guess goodbye to the listeners. I think next time the subject is going to be about racist depictions such as like Jeddah. And
that's something
like that.
I was never even allowed to watch.
Yeah.
My mum turned that movie off.
So I think that's where I'm going to be heading soon. That's been something I've been interested in about doing soon. So even if it's not the next episode, it may be something down the line that I take a look at. And even our conversations around Shell has definitely inspired me to maybe open that up a little more. So
yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Jasper. It's been great.
Thank you for coming. All right, let's shut this off.